Good day to you, cinephiles, and welcome to the first ever Nerd With Me movie review. I'm your host, John Ricky. Today, for our first review, is actually not going to be a singular review. It's actually going to be the review of a few movies, about 6 of them, that go by the name of Resident Evil, that has been going on for 15 years. Lord knows how that really happened, but I want to give you a big overview of the whole series as a whole, its creation, eventually get into the actual review of the most recent installment, and hopefully the last, called Resident Evil Final Chapter. Now, this is not going to be a usual thing. It's just the fact that I've never reviewed anything before. This is my first time actually reviewing something for YouTube. And since it's the 7th or 6th part, I can't remember. There's too many of these movies. So, I just want to give you my little inklings as into what I think about this whole series as a whole and what it could have been. But this is not going to be a usual thing. Next review will probably be more, obviously more focused and just based on the movie at hand, obviously. So let's get started. Now, first and foremost, I want to say that I am a pretty decent fan of the games. Like, I love the first Resident Evil games, especially the first 4. They are amazing, and they were creepy and great survival horror. It felt like a pure horror fan's dream in digital form, or in game form rather. So I was really happy when I heard that, oh my god, they're going to create a film adaptation for this movie. Now, obviously, film adaptations for games have been, for lack of a better word, mostly garbage. If they come out half decent, it's like, that's like Citizen Kane, congratulations. But so the Resident Evil games actually had these great mainstay characters that are actually kind of iconic in terms of video game characters. You have, if you're a fan of them, or you probably actually have heard of them, they're actually in the movies, but as side characters, which is whatever. But you had Chris, Jill, and Leon and Claire Redfield, and they were great characters. Like, the first time, this is one of the main characters they actually latched on to. Before it was just like, oh yeah, you're this guy and this is history, but no real story or whatnot. But yeah, it was a really interesting game. It was one of the first ones with cutscenes and everything like that, I believe. So I was really happy when they started saying, oh my god, they're going to make a movie about it. So, come 2002, you get the first Resident Evil movie. And the first thing you notice is that, there's no Jill there's no Jill Valentine, there's no Chris Redfield, there's no Wesker, there's no Barry Allen, or not Barry Allen, but Barry. And okay, we are not going into in and around the mansion, and the mansion looks kind of clean and everything else. So you're wondering, why is this happening? Okay, we have a sterile environment, all that stuff and all that. But, you watch the movie and you're watching this character named Alice. I'm like, okay, she has no memory, da-da-da-da-da. Alright, I can roll with it. I'll roll with it. And movie turned out to be, to me, it was decent. It wasn't great. It wasn't like, oh my god, it's amazing. It was just like, okay, they're trying to do a different spin on it. So Resident Evil 1, is basically, and like the way that they set it up, for that it was actually a parallel piece, kind of a prequel to what happens in the first game. I'm like, okay, so that's where they're taking it. That's actually kind of interesting. Now, I'm gonna say this a few times, is that happens a lot with this series. It's like, oh, that's an interesting take, and then it just kind of poops to bed. But anyway, I watched that movie and has this whole amnesia thing, and the lab that they find under the mansion turns out to be this whole big underground city. And okay, alright, so I can see where they're going with this, but the movie felt very sterile, and for some reason they have martial arts in here where you see her jumping and doing some daggone Matrix stuff and kicking one of the zombie dogs in the face, and that supposedly like breaks his neck or something like that. I'm like, okay, alright, I'll let it go. But the characters were kind of flat. I'm like, alright, so, but it set up for the second one. I watched the second one. All of a sudden, and okay, so they bring in Jill Valentine as a side character, and you're following this character named Alice, who's turns out to be who is the main character rather, and they bring in Jill Valentine. It's like, okay, cool. Now they're going to, really mesh them together. Great. Let's see what happens. Whew, wow. I watched that movie and I was flabbergasted. It looked like a student film with a nice budget. It was so many things were wrong with it, and even wrong with the lore, because anybody who's played the game, obviously, and seen the movie, the second one named Apocalypse, knows that okay, they basically cherry picked the third game in the series, Nemesis. Nemesis is in there. Turns out he's actually had a little backstory, and he's actually a main character from the first one that was the only survivor with Alice. I'm like, okay, that's kind of cool, but then it's just like, wow, the filmmaking, the lighting, it was just like, what? It's like, that's not Nemesis. And the most egregious thing, and this is not just as a Resident Evil fan, but just as a film fan, it's like you have this big monster that's chasing these characters down, and it's supposed to be this unstoppable, like Jason Voorhees, Michael Myers, silent killer with a bazooka, and is like a big tyrant. And you're just like, oh my god. And at the end of the movie, Alice, who supposedly bonded with the T virus that she kind of got infected with in the first movie, she actually does a Bruce Lee fight scene with Nemesis. Like, wait a minute, what? Why? That makes no sense in any sense of the word. It's like, especially as a Resident Evil fan, you don't go up against Nemesis with your fist and actually come out winning. What? And I started laughing. This became a comedy to me. Oh man, it was so bad. So I was like, I had to take a moment and really look at what happened here. I started going through IMDb, and it turns out, and I look on the internet and everything else. Turns out they've actually weren't originally supposed to have this type of thing. It was actually supposed to follow the storyline. And guess who they first commissioned to write and possibly direct the Resident Evil adaptation? The godfather of zombie horror, himself, George Romero, the creator of Night of the Living Dead, Day of the Dead, Dawn of the Dead. They actually commissioned him, and he even wrote a script. Actually, and it is actually on the internet. Where we'll in the description below we'll have there's a link for that script. You will read it and you will cry, because it's like the alternate universe of this movie series that should have been. My God. Yeah, you get free time, check it out. It has Jill, it has Chris. It's little variations of what it is in the story, but it's acceptable ones. Instead of this freaking, oh my God, this schlockfest that's like that's really just a rip-off of Matrix. And then that brings me to the next film, Extinction, which is basically a rip-off of Day of the Dead mixed with Mad Max. Suddenly, the whole infection infected the world and everything like that, and everyone's living in this desert landscape. Right? Wow. Okay. But you know what? Let me take it back real quick. Actually, the second one was a horrible movie, right? But it actually had a nice setup for the third one with the character of Alice. Now, whereas, like, you are left to believe that Umbrella can actually control her. And this is a whole through line throughout the whole series, that like Alice might be able to be controlled because whatever, they did experiments to her. You know, the group always gets caught, and at one point by the Umbrella Corporation, maybe gets operated on. I swear to God, in this whole series, she wakes up like probably 17 times in the 6 movies that have been made. And half the times it's because she's hooked up to an Umbrella Corporation. And that's the one thing about this series, is that like there's a whole bunch of callbacks to the same thing over and over and over again. Like, there's this one of the few great like cinematic scenes was this whole situation with this one corridor in the first movie, dealing with lasers cutting people apart. It was like, oh, that's actually a pretty cool and intense idea. They come back to that like 17 times, for crying out loud. So 3, I'll be honest with you, 3 I actually enjoyed for Schlockfest. But here's the thing, it's not directed by Paul W.S. Anderson. Not Paul Thomas Anderson of Boogie Nights and There Will Be Blood fame, but Paul W.S. Anderson, who created, adapted another video game movie that actually is one of the better ones, Mortal Kombat. Great guilty pleasure, love it, martial arts, so on and so forth. Pretty good. At least the first one was. And it's just like, at this point, we followed this Alice character for 3 movies now, and there's no development with her whatsoever. It's like, okay, she has the sanctity of life or whatever, she values that. That's cool and all, but that's the thing with this series, is that like each movie kind of washes the second one away, or washes the previous one away a little bit, like muddles the water. Every time they go into a new entry, it first off reviews the first movie. I mean, the way they review it, and it feels like it's a cut and paste script, because the first line in most of these monologues at the beginning of the movie and it's by Mila Jovovich as Alice, and her first words are almost always, "My name is Alice." It's like, no crap, we've been following you for 3 movies now, come on. But like I said, and that's considered character development, I guess, in Paul W.S. Anderson's eyes. But I was hoping that at least with the third one and the way they set it up, the way they ended it, I was actually intrigued. I'm like, ooh, that could be a good storyline to maybe have Alice become the tragic villain who ends up battling our favorite video game characters, and the two parallel storylines combined in this third one. So you have Jill, Chris, Leon Kennedy, Claire Redfield, all of them, and they eventually have to fight, and they're trying to keep Alice from like basically going dark side and killing everybody, along with dealing with the zombie apocalypse. I thought that would have been cool. No, we didn't get that. We get references to the newest Resident Evil game that correspondingly is released along with the movie, and little very much big fan service for the video game characters. That's just like shallow at the shallowest level, at the lowest common denominator. It's like, oh my god, there's the liquors. Oh my god, there's the such and such. There's the plagueis, infection. Oh wow. Oh my god. It's like, okay, cool, whatever, But can we get a good story? Alright. So basically, at the end of Extinction, she basically becomes like the anti-Agent Smith in Matrix Revolutions. It's like, oh my god, they keep cherry picking from better movies. I mean, even though Revolutions and Reloaded are weaker, but better series. It's like, okay, there's Mad Max. You got, obviously, Day of the Dead, the Dead series. I mean, it's just a complete and utter rip-off of other better movies. So I'm like, okay, there we go. That's how it ends, with her having multiple clones of herself. Yeah, and that's the way it ends. I don't really want to go into detail about the last two, because the last two are just so achingly horrible. What's it called? I think the one's called Aftermath, Aftermath, and Retribution. Retribution was freaking horrible, man. There's no connective, way of portraying the world. It's like, okay, in 3, like the whole world has become a desert planet. It looks like the Sahara or something like that. I'm like, all right, we're going with that. But then in like the next one, it's like, you're seeing winter greens and everything like that. It's like, I'm confused. Isn't this all in America? What is going on? So it just really had no sense. It doesn't connect. And each one, it rewrites history a little bit. In the second movie, it's like, oh, hey, the whole virus was created by so and so. I forget what his name is. Like, I don't know, Cyrus or something like that. Dr. Cyrus or something. And this will call back to what the most recent movie, what's it called? What the most recent movie is trying to do, and it rewrites itself again. So so let me just skip over those. So that brings us to the new one. Now, the new one is Alice, and it's supposed to be like, oh, we're going back to the hive. Alright, great, cool. Now, up until this point, Alice has been Superwoman or Wonder Woman with Akira-like powers. If you don't know Akira, it's a great anime, one of the classic animes. It's like Citizen Kane of animes. If you and it deals with like, telekinesis and everything else. But that's basically what Alice became. She became this souped up Mary Sue character And I don't mind a Mary Sue, but just as long as it makes sense. I mean, she had those powers. She's like levitating in motorcycles and carrying on, and then she loses the powers, right? Now, at the end of the last one, Retribution, they ended on this scene where it's like, okay, stuff's about to go down. Now, come to this one, the final chapter. It starts off after, like the day after, or maybe even a month after that whole. There's supposed to be all these zombies in Washington D.C. They're sitting up top there, up top of the White House and everything like that. Seems like that should be like a full movie. No, we open up with the aftermath of that. And I'm sitting here thinking, like, wait a minute, we weren't gonna get that battle? I mean, and Alice just pops out of a bunker or something like that. Don't know if everybody's dead or alive or whatnot. Is she the only survivor? I mean, what happened? So it already starts off. Resident Evil, the final chapter, starts off with a whole mesh of questions. Like, what? Oh, by the way, it first starts off, like I said, it keeps regurgitating what happened in the last few movies, all the movies. It goes throughout the whole series and mentions that, oh, this happened, that happened, that happened. Now it rewrites it so that Alice, the whole weapon, the whole T-virus was created by so-and-so, and the Red Queen was based on his daughter, and this, and that, and it just rewrites it all together. And it's the very thinnest of plot lines. And that's the other thing about this. The Umbrella Corporation and all that whole schlock, you're just like, why is this corporation even doing it? They already killed the world. Well, let's just say in this one, it turns out that they decided to go biblical with this. Now it's a whole, the Umbrella Corporation is a whole bunch of zealots, and there's this whole thing that involves, biblical aspects, except they put a little science into it. So, but you're going through this movie, you meet Alice again, you're following her, and the CG is terrible. It is terrible. It is. You're seeing these flying monsters and all this carrying on, and wow. Let's just get on the directing efforts and editing and everything else. So, I swear to God, you will feel your eyes burning watching this movie. Because even if you're not an editor, you will notice the edits, because there's so daggone many edits. I mean, there's so many edits. Like, I felt like I was developing epilepsy watching this film, because I swear to God, it was an edit every, I'm gonna say, half a second. There was an edit. There's this one point where Alice is shooting this monster, sort of, and it's like a 10-15 second like shooting. She's emptying the clips, and you're just sitting there like, my God, how many? You can't help it but think, how many edits did they put in there? There was probably literally 150 edits in that 15 seconds. It was just, I mean, I was grabbing my head. I was rubbing my eyes because my brain couldn't function watching this film. It was too much going on at a time, and it just felt like it was just a rush job edit where they're just trying to get to the finish. There's so much that I couldn't even tell what's happening half the time. Plus, they were trying to do this whole, I guess they were very inspired by 24 type of thing. Now, I don't mind that type of filmmaking with the handhelds and everything like that, but it was really jarring. It was just really unnecessary. It's like, lock it up. Why is this all shaky cam? That just added to like a queasiness I felt. But anyway, I don't know what it is. I mean, we can talk about acting, but there's like barely any in this film, and it's not the actors' fault. It's the writing and the way it's edited. You don't feel for any of these characters. There is a point where a character dies and there's nothing, because I'm like, wait a minute, who was that? I'm still trying to figure out who this is. It's like, oh, that person died. Okay. I laughed a few times when certain people died, because there's this one portion where someone was bitten, does this and shoots the zombie that bit them, and then it's like, oh wait, I'm dead. I'm like, wow. Okay, so wow, man. Speaking of actors, I mean, I just feel sorry for Mila. It's like, Mila Jovovich, this is a woman that I thought should have been nominated for an Oscar, like literally closing in on 20 years ago. You seen her in Fifth Element. She was amazing. She was lovable, all that stuff. She was pretty good as the hooker in He Got Game for Spike Lee. And her best movie was that The Messenger for her then husband Luc Besson. And arguably, to me, like, that's like Luc Besson's like best film next to Fifth Element and Leon, or aka The Professional. But regardless, I just feel sorry for her. I mean, because she's been this character for 15 years, and there's no acting involved. She's just spouting out words that kind of make it go along, and there's some terrible dialogue in this movie. It is some of the worst. Wow, it's like, oh, I mean, you even seen it in the trailer, let's put it that way. But wow. But everyone else in there is like, okay, Ali Lauder as Claire, like, she's good for what she is or whatnot. She's a better actress than this. I just feel, and oh my god, my boy Ian Glenn. Now, he's that amazing actor who, if you're a Game of Thrones fan, you will know him right away. He's the villain of the movie. Plays, I'm trying to remember his character's name on Game of Thrones. I think it's like Ser Geroux. Basically, he's the one who messes with Khaleesi, or rather protects her, and it's like kind of, got a thing for her and all that stuff. Well, he's in here, and he's the best part of this movie, because he brings his A game to this movie. He's the only thing that's actually really keeping it afloat. But with all the not lens flares, but all the jump edits, I mean, and the dialogue and the situations that happen, it's just, I feel sorry for him. I'm like, man, you must really need that paycheck. But yeah, she's really a non-factor in this movie. She's like introduced, and then, just like everyone else. basically everyone is indispensable except for Alice. And Alice, my God, she gets her butt whooped throughout this whole movie. There's probably like about 3 or 4 times where she gets knocked unconscious, and there's situations where it's like, wow, she really might be a villain here, because there's parts where it's like, just asinine writing and asinine setup for action scenes where she's trying to save someone and actually puts them in more danger, and it just doesn't make sense. It's a jumbled mess. So hopefully with that, I'm gonna give you a grade. I haven't really figured out what, I haven't decided on what type of grade it's going to be. If it's either going to be a ABC or 1 through 10 system. I might even create my own. But in the meantime, I'm going to give this a nice F, or if I could, F minus. I'd give it a Z if that was possible, because this was a schlocky mesh of shots that was slappily edited by someone who has ADHD or something like that. No offense to ADHD people out there, my bad, but it just feels that way. It's like, oh yeah, it's like, I mean, you have these action scenes and like, okay, and then but it's so chopped and screwed that it's just a complete disjointed mess. I hope the subtitle, the final chapter, is legit. This is the last one that we will ever see of this incarnation. Hopefully in a few years they reboot it and actually take it back to what it should have been, which is a grisly, visceral survivor horror. And if you're gonna have a character that's so overpowered, have that be on the villain side. So with that, I hope you enjoyed the review. Talk to you later. See you on the flip side. Good luck, cinephiles.